If Harris gets in, I think the month of November and December could be very good for Bitcoin. I think if Trump gets in, I think we have an immediate jump, because I think that means all crypto gets reevaluated. I think the SEC gets changed. I think the Elizabeth Warren choke point 2.0 plan gets thrown in the garbage. And I think we immediately jump to well above 100,000. I mean, very quickly. It wouldn't surprise me if we end the year up more like 140,000, 180,000. I think it's an excellent time to buy.
Fred Krueger begins by examining the potential consequences of the 2024 U.S. election on the Bitcoin market. He notes that if Kamala Harris were to win, there might initially be some disappointment among Bitcoin holders due to concerns about increased regulation. This disappointment, however, would likely be short-lived. Krueger argues that the continued trajectory of money printing and fiscal policy would eventually drive demand for Bitcoin, particularly as investors seek protection against inflation and economic uncertainty. He believes this realization could take no more than a month to set in, and that by the end of 2024, Bitcoin could see substantial growth even under a Harris administration. On the other hand, Krueger is far more bullish about a Trump victory, suggesting that such an outcome could lead to an immediate revaluation of the entire cryptocurrency market. He predicts that a Trump administration would overhaul the regulatory environment for crypto, potentially dismantling efforts like Elizabeth Warren's anti-crypto agenda. According to Krueger, this could result in a dramatic surge in Bitcoin's price, with the potential to reach as high as $140,000 to $180,000 in short order.
Please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. You can also check out our other videos on cryptocurrencies and the overall digital asset space, and drop your comments and observations in the comments section below. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely contributes to the channel's growth. Thanks and enjoy the video.
I think nominally, if Harris wins, there might be an initial phase of, oh, I'm disappointed, I should sell Bitcoin. There's going to be more regulation on Bitcoin. I think that would be only very small, very nominal, and pretty soon the greater realization that money printing is going to continue will go on. That'll be very good for Bitcoin. So I don't even think that realization is going to take more than a month. So even if Harris gets in, I think the month of November and December could be very good for Bitcoin. I think if Trump gets in, I think we have an immediate jump, because I think that means all crypto gets reevaluated. I think the SEC gets changed. I think the Elizabeth Warren choke point 2.0 plan gets thrown in the garbage. And I think we immediately jump to well above 100,000. I mean, very quickly. It wouldn't surprise me if we end the year up more like 140,000, 180,000, something like that. I mean, we could just have an exponential rise. And by the way, these bubbles, even though the power law is not exponential, these bubbles are exponential in nature. As Giovanni's pointed out, the exponential on the way up and on the way down. So you have these 1% a day kind of moves up and 1% a day down. So that's generally the way I feel. I'm not playing this thing day to day. I don't trade the market. I'm just long Bitcoin. Sometimes I buy a little bit more Bitcoin. I think it's a good time to buy Bitcoin right here. You're below the trend line. You've got a possible catalyst on the way up. So if you buy and Trump gets elected, which the poly market odds are now saying 50-50, then you've got a really good position. It's great to be really in the money in Bitcoin, because then you sort of care less. It drops 20%, you don't care. If you just bought, it drops 20%, you're hurting, So So it's really good to get your foot in the door and to have a position that's like profitable and has a big margin of profit in it. So I think this election could be that. Now, if it doesn't work out the way you want it, you're just going to have to stick with it a little longer. But I don't think you're going to have to stick with it a whole cycle or anything. I think you may have to stick with it 6 months. So I think it's an excellent time to buy. I think Joe Carlasali is optimistic on the in-kind redemptions. That doesn't mean you will necessarily be able to in-kind both contributions and redemptions. Will that apply to you? I don't know. It certainly the legal environment is going to change very favorably to Bitcoin in the next year if Trump's elected. And if Trump's not elected, it's not the end of the world for Bitcoin. It might be the end of the world for the U.S. economy, but maybe not. But certainly not for Bitcoin. So I'm very, very. I think we're in a very good position. I don't think that this October story is compromised here, and I think there's more chance of hitting 500,000 than a UFO hitting. But in any case, the next 90 days and then the next year after could be amazing for Bitcoin.
Joe Consorti makes a compelling case that the current economic conditions are more favorable for Bitcoin than at any point since 2020. Despite not being in a recession, the U.S. is experiencing loose financial conditions and high market sentiment, which Joe argues will drive more investors toward risk assets like Bitcoin. Furthermore, while the Federal Reserve is not currently engaging in quantitative easing, Joe believes that any significant economic weakness could prompt a return to asset purchases, further boosting Bitcoin's value. Joe addresses the role of Bitcoin as a future Treasury reserve asset for companies. He notes that we are still in the early stages of this trend, but the outsized returns that Bitcoin can offer in an environment of monetary easing make it an increasingly attractive option for corporations. As AI and blockchain technologies continue to evolve, Joe believes that Bitcoin's role as both a store of value and a tool for leveraging balance sheets will become more widely recognized.
I would take a look at something like ETH-BTC in order to gauge whether or not these altcoins are kind of a buy or not. But more importantly, what the market's sentiment toward these alternative currencies are. And if you take a look at the ETH-BTC pair, it actually dropped below this critical psychological level, 0.04. Now it's trading at 0.39 rather. And one thing of note, Jeremy, and for the viewers, is that this is the first cycle where Ethereum is not outperforming Bitcoin. It is not rising relative to Bitcoin. The ratio of Ethereum to Bitcoin has been in this downtrend. And so if price is truth, which it is, that suggests to me that investors are more wary of other assets like Ethereum, like Solana, like these other cryptocurrencies, and more seeing the value of a truly decentralized protocol like Bitcoin offers. That's also corroborated by the fact that the Bitcoin ETFs have had record-breaking inflows when they launched at the start of the year, and the Ethereum ETFs, frankly, their launch was quite disappointing, according to Eric Balchunas and James Seifert, the ETF analysts over at Bloomberg. And so you look at the disappointing launch of Ethereum relative to Bitcoin, it suggests that institutions want a piece of the pie when it comes to Bitcoin, not necessarily Ethereum. And that's corroborated further by the price action in both of the spot markets, Ethereum declining relative to Bitcoin. And so frankly, I think if we're talking, this global easing cycle that's commencing, this massive wave of monetary liquidity that's coming onto the table, I think more investors are not just recognizing Bitcoin as a solution, but more institutions are recognizing Bitcoin as a solution as well. And so just judging by the price and the ETF inflows, that suggests to me the value here is an absolute scarcity. So the value here is Bitcoin. Obviously, you'll remember in 2020, we were cutting interest rates. Certainly during that time, it was in response to a recession and we were recovering from a recession. But arguably, because we're still in economic expansion here in the United States, it's an even even more favorable environment for Bitcoin. I mean, look, financial conditions are already loose. Market sentiment is already very, very good. People are already avid risk asset investors. And so a further reduction in interest rates will only encourage more of that pouring out of things like US Treasuries and safer assets and into things like Bitcoin, obviously considered much more risky assets. And so I'd argue, because of the fact that we're not in recession, we're cutting during a time of economic expansion, that it might even be more favorable for Bitcoin and other risk assets. The one fly in the ointment that doesn't make 2024 as favorable is that the Fed isn't actively buying assets from banks, or quantitative easing, the thing that we colloquially understand as money printing. That's what we call it. That money printing isn't exactly yet occurring. If we were to get extreme weakness within the US economy, chances are we would see that direct asset purchase program like quantitative easing start taking place. But that's one thing that's not happening now that was happening in 2020. But aside from that, I would certainly agree with that, given what I've said with other analysts, that this is the most favorable macro environment for Bitcoin since 2020. We certainly are at the very beginning of this, because companies and corporates are beginning to understand the utility of having a blockchain for their internal operations. But I think more importantly, seeing the value of Bitcoin as a reserve asset on their balance sheet. Look, you've seen what MicroStrategy has done since August of 2020. It has purchased Bitcoin using issued debt. It's levered up in order to purchase Bitcoin, and then it has issued more equity, rinse and repeat. And this MicroStrategy strategy, if you will, of using Bitcoin as their primary treasury reserve asset has caused its stock price to more than 10x. And now you're starting to see imitators. You're starting to see people like Semler Scientific and other non-public entities, other private companies begin incorporating Bitcoin onto their balance sheet. And so while there's a great deal of utility for AI and blockchain when it comes to integrating that into corporate functions, I do believe that the real killer app of Bitcoin and other things out there is the value it holds as a reserve asset, right? The outsized returns it provides in an environment such as this one, and truly in any environment, right? Bitcoin invented absolute scarcity, but it also invented digital ownership. And so the ability to not just have an absolutely scarce slice of the pie to preserve the value of your balance sheet, but also leverage that balance sheet in order to provide returns for investors, it really is Bitcoin's future killer app. I do think that over the next year and over the next half decade as well, Bitcoin becoming a treasury reserve asset is going to become much more mainstream as people see the value in it from people like MicroStrategy, Semler Scientific, and others. And I do think that the evolution of AI and the integration of AI into day-to-day functionality is going to drive that shift as well.
Fred Krueger's insights paint a bullish picture for Bitcoin in the coming months and years. Whether it's the political outcome of the 2024 U.S. election or the broader macroeconomic environment, Krueger believes Bitcoin is poised to thrive. His analysis highlights the growing institutional interest in Bitcoin, its emerging role as a treasury reserve asset, and its ability to serve as a hedge against economic uncertainty. As we look ahead to the potential catalysts that could drive Bitcoin's price higher, it's clear that the cryptocurrency is entering a new phase of maturity and adoption. Now is the time to pay attention to these trends and consider the long-term potential of Bitcoin in an increasingly digital and decentralized world.
Please like and subscribe my channel.